Greetings class, Mr. Munir here with your final EUDAX project. So we've got a little bit of electromagic going on here that I'm very excited to show you. I'm going to just walk you through it. I'm going to show you what it does, I'm going to explain what it does, and then it'll be your task to do the same thing. So first, let's just see here. I've got a simple circuit, switch, battery, motor. Now I've got three motors here, but the only one that's actually receiving electric power from this battery is this one right here. Then if you take a closer look, on the shaft of this motor I've got a pulley wheel here, and then I've got a rubber band that connects to this pulley here, which is then on the shaft of this motor. And then I have these electric wires that connect these two motors together, this motor to that motor there. Cool. So, and then I've got this fan blade here. Alright, so that's basically what's happening. So you can understand that I'm going to turn this on, and then this motor is going to spin, which is going to spin this pulley, which then should spin this pulley. And that's not all that interesting. It's like, okay, that's cool. But the real interesting thing is what happens with this motor here. So I'm going to turn it on, and let's see what happens. Whoa. As you can see, when I turn on this switch, not only does this spin and this spin, but actually this blade here starts to spin, and you're like, wait, how is that happening? There's no wires, there's no secret wires. I'm not trying to do any magic, it's not like an illusion here. I'll lift it up, there's nothing inside the box, nothing on either side of it. It's just a box, I'm a math teacher, not a math magician, right? So what's going on here? It's no tricks, it's just physics. So now you've seen what it does. Whoa, I turn it on, this pulley spins, that pulley spins, and then that fan clearly is spinning. I'm going to turn it off again. So you've seen what it does. Now I'm going to walk you through the circuit so you can build it yourself. Alright, so first things first, let's talk about the simple circuit. What I've got here is my 9-volt battery. If you've got just a AA battery, that's fine, use it. And I've got my simple circuit here. I've got the red and the black. The black goes into the switch. Then I've got another black that goes into the motor. And then I've got the red wire coming directly out of the battery connector straight into this motor. So that's nothing new. That's something that you've done multiple times at this point. And then all I've done is I've gone ahead and glued this battery and this switch onto the box. Now, to make this box, I mean, it's not some, this is just your electronics box that came with the EUDAX kit. Hopefully you still have got it. I just cut the top off of it so it made a nice platform. So cool. Alright, so that's the simple circuit. You've done that before. Notice that I've got those the heat tube, the shrink tube, sorry, on this part. I've got the shrink tube, but actually on this part, on the motor, I didn't use the shrink tube because it really doesn't work that well on the motor, so I just used hot glue. Now if you don't have hot glue at this point, there are elements of this project that will be challenging. For instance, you can't just use regular glue on a motor like that. Only hot glue is going to really work. But you can always just use shrink tube, it'll work just fine. But at this point, hot glue is kind of important. If you don't have it, that's okay. Like I've always said, tape can work. Or regular glue can work in a lot of these instances. Okay, so that's the simple circuit, and now let's move on to the next. Okay, on to the next step. So I've got the motor from the simple circuit, and I've got it in a motor mount, and I've got that motor mount hot glued onto the box. Now, once I've done that, what I want to do is I want to figure out where exactly I want this motor and where I want this motor, and how I'm going to do that I'll show you in the next step. Alright, so as you can see, I've got the shaft from the motor going through this white rail here, and then it goes into this pulley, and I've got the same thing going on here. And that rail just kind of acts as a support to keep these motors from being pulled inward by this rubber band. There's not a whole lot of tension on that rubber band, but I just wanted it there for a little extra support. And so the question is, how do I want this set up? Well, there are two types of holes in this rail. You see there are the little holes and the big holes. Now I want that shaft going through one of the big holes. Okay, so that's how I've got it. I want that shaft and this shaft going through a big hole. So as you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 holes in between them. A big, a little, big, and a little, so that can help you with the measuring. And then this pulley is a smaller one, and this pulley is a big one with the 3 holes there. Okay, so I've got this motor going through this rail, the shaft going through this rail, and then after I've put it through the rail, I press that pulley onto it. Okay, now once you've got that motor mounted and you've got it through the rail and the pulley pressed on, you want to then go ahead and figure out where this motor is going to go. Now that's going to be determined by the holes in this rail. So you can't just put it anywhere because it won't go through a hole. So what you should do is, before you glue this one on, you want to figure out exactly where you want it to go by putting it through this rail, putting this shaft here. That shaft has to go through the rail, and I chose one right on the biggest hole on the end, goes through, and then press the pulley down, and that's going to determine exactly where this needs to go. Okay, it's a specific distance that this can be, and you figure that distance out by putting that motor through the rail. Once that's done, you've got it figured out, and you press this small pulley onto it, then you can go ahead and glue this down. Okay, so at this step, you should have basically this done. You glued this down, you put it through this rail and through a big hole, press this big pulley onto it, then you figured out where this motor needs to go by finding the last big hole on the end of the rail, put that through there, press the pulley on, and you're good to go. Then you want to glue this motor mount down or tape it or however you want to do it, so that these two motors are nice and secure. Okay? And then we'll pick up on the next step. Alright, the next step is just going ahead and taking this rubber band and putting it on. So it's pretty easy. Now when you put it on, there shouldn't be too much tension. If there's too much tension, you run the risk of creating too much friction. If there's too little friction, then obviously this won't work at all. So it should be just enough that it's nice and tight, but not too tight. Alright, now your next step is going ahead and mounting this motor. Now where this motor is doesn't really matter, but I put it right across from this motor here so it would make the wiring easy. But you want to go ahead and mount that motor exactly the same as you've done with the other ones. You just go ahead and glue that motor mount down onto your box, and then you're done with that step. And like I said, it can go anywhere, but I put it right across from this motor so the wiring would be easy. Alright, now once you've mounted this final motor, you want to go ahead and connect the two motors together. So I chose red and black wire. Of course, the actual color of this wire doesn't matter. These two wires are the exact same thing, the only difference is the color. So I have a red and a black wire, and I've got red connecting one terminal from one motor to the one terminal to the other on the other motor, and then I've got the same thing from the black. So I'm connecting these two with wires. Now the only thing important for you to understand is I don't have the red and the black on the same terminal. So I've got red here and black here on different terminals of this motor, and red here and black here on different terminals of that motor. Now it's obviously very important. And so now that you've got those connected with wire, you've basically got this thing ready to go, and the only thing that you got to do is, just stick a fan propeller blade on here. I chose this one. It doesn't really matter. In fact, this doesn't do anything except just makes the effect more dramatic. So once you've got that wired up, you should be ready to go. And there you have it. Alright, now the last thing that I forgot to mention earlier was that I actually have this rail hot glued. I have some hot glue between the motors and this rail here, and I've got it pressed up nicely and tight against those motors, and I want to make sure I have some room in between the propeller and the rail so it's not hitting. And the reason why I glued this is because if you don't have this glued on, it's going to wobble back and forth. So make sure that you glue this, put some glue in there in between the rail and both motors. Okay, so now the question is, how does this thing work? Well, the cool thing is it's not magic at all. In fact, it's just electromagnetism. Now, there are two things that happen, and really they're the same thing, with a magnet and a coil of wire. If I take a coil of copper wire and I pass a magnet through it, passing that magnet through it actually induces a current of electricity flowing through that coil of wire. And the opposite is true too. If I have a coil of wire and I pass current through a coil of wire, it creates a magnetic field that can attract or repel a magnet. Pretty cool, huh? And I can create that magnetic field to have a north pole, if you will, or a south pole, if you will, to attract or repel the north or south pole of a regular bar magnet. Okay, well, that's exactly how an electric motor works. So how does an electric motor work? Well, I have a battery, it creates current, and that current flows through this motor. Now the way it works is there's a bar magnet inside of here, and the current flows in such a way that it attracts and repels the north and south poles of the magnet inside of this motor, and it's timed. So it attracts it and then repels it, and attracts it and repels it, and that attraction repulsion causes the magnet inside of the motor to spin, because it kind of, you can think of it like it attracts the north pole, and then as soon as it gets there, it repels it, which causes it to keep spinning, and so it causes it to keep spinning over and over and over and over again. Well, that magnet inside the motor is what's attached to the shaft, and when that magnet spins, that shaft starts to spin as well. So that's exactly how an electric motor works. Okay, that's cool, but how does that impact our circuit? Well, here's how. When I have the current flowing from this battery into this motor's powered, this causes this shaft to spin, and then I've got it attached to this pulley, which causes this pulley to spin, which causes the shaft of this motor to spin, which causes the magnet inside of that motor to spin. Now when that magnet spins, it's like the first thing I described. When a magnet moves through a coil of wire, it induces a current in that coil of wire. Well, when the magnet of this shaft, this electric motor, spins, it induces current in the coils of wire inside of this motor. Well, guess what? That current doesn't just stay in this motor because I've got it attached by these wires to this motor here. So the current flows through these wires into this motor and causes this fan to spin. Magic. Alright, so now that you know that it's not magic, it's electromagnetism that's causing this fan to spin, you know how to build the circuit, you've seen how this whole thing works, it's your turn to make it happen yourself. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, I hope you enjoy making this project. I love you guys. Until next time, enjoy robotics.